My name is Phil Godfrey, and I'm the chairman of the TETRA Association. And of course, this is the TETRA World Congress. So I'm sure you would be expecting me to talk about TETRA. Well, actually, I'm not going to do that, and neither are my fellow presenters in this session. What we would like to do is to explore the subject of what technologies we might expect to see or wish to see in the next 5 to 10 years or so, and how those technologies might impact on the users of mission-critical communications. Specifically, we're going to be exploring the subject of mobile broadband. And I intend to start off this debate not by telling you information, but by raising a number of questions. There is no doubt that the subject of mobile broadband has risen to the top of the agendas of many user groups. And these user groups are actively looking at how future technologies will impact their business. The US has stimulated a great deal of discussion on this subject by announcing that the public safety community has decided to adopt LTE as their technology for future mobile data solutions. This is a bold decision, but for me, it is as yet unclear exactly what this decision really means. I'm delighted to welcome two speakers who've flown over from the United States this week to explain a little bit more about that decision. So, where are we starting from? Well, I said that I wasn't going to talk about TETRA, but in reality, that is where we're starting from. TETRA is now present in 121 countries of the world and has set the benchmark for mission-critical communications. TETRA's voice and narrowband data services are the best in the world, and we see no alternative on the horizon that will be capable of replacing TETRA's rich and diverse functionality. An enhancement to the standard in the form of TEDS, that's TETRA Enhanced Data Services, has taken TETRA's data capability up to between 150 and even up to 500 kilobits per second. And these rates can support some very useful applications. ETSI is currently working on further enhancement that will increase TEDS throughput for local applications. And I'm pleased to tell you that the TEDS IOP testing has already started. So this is not a twinkle in the eye, the technology is real. However, the explosive growth in the use of smartphones and tablet computers has resulted in an expectation by many users that what they can already do with their cellular technology, they should be able to do with their professional mobile radio network. There is no doubt in my mind that this is the direction in which we are heading, and the US is clearly showing us the way. There are two fundamental questions, though, that still need to be answered before users can start making serious plans for the future. Firstly, there is the question of how critical is the data for mission-critical users. Secondly, there is the question of how mobile broadband services can be delivered in a mission-critical environment. Let me first of all explore the criticality of data in a mission-critical world. If a policeman wants to run a vehicle license plate check and the answer comes back in 20 seconds instead of 2 seconds, that might be irritating for him, but it certainly isn't a matter of life and death. If a high-temperature alarm needs to be sent back from a turbine that's pumping natural gas, then time could certainly be critical. So it's very much dependent on the application, and users need to review the criticality of their data quite closely before considering which transport mechanism might be best. If we create a simple chart plotting message size against the urgency with which a data message needs to be completed, you can analyze the different types of message that an organization may wish to send. For example, vehicle location information requires only a small amount of data, but it needs to be sent fairly quickly, otherwise it's going to be out of date by the time it's received. Images of sufficient quality for use in a court of law require a lot of data, but they're probably not that urgent. They could be sent when there is spare capacity available on the network. So that's the principle that I'm talking about, and here are some more examples to illustrate my point. Clearly, the further right that you go, the less time-critical the data is. And for that, commercial data services may well be suitable. But data that is genuinely time-critical probably needs to be sent using a dedicated network. Of course, what may seem to be non-critical today may take on a much greater degree of importance once the users start to become used to having that facility. So beware of introducing technology that seems nice to have. You may soon find that it becomes mission critical. So if we accept that some mobile data applications are genuinely mission critical, what then does this mean for the delivery mechanism? Well, I would suggest to you that at first sight, there appear to be three possibilities for delivering mobile broadband service in a mission critical network. The easiest method is simply to use the public LTE or WiMAX networks, which are starting to appear in a number of countries. The second is to build a dedicated network of your own, which you can tailor to your requirements and over which you will have complete control. But this may be an expensive option. So the third one is to build your own network where you need it most, and then migrate onto the public carriers where you feel that the cost is not justified. And I'd like to explore these three options in a little bit more detail. Option one was to take service from a public network operator. Clearly, you will need to pay for the data that you use, and as the usage increases, so will your costs. And this is something that may be difficult to control. However, I'm sure that good negotiations with your carrier are able to solve that particular problem. But the next question is to do with capacity and availability. Public cellular networks are designed to ensure that there is sufficient capacity for normal usage, with some spare capacity to cope with peak demand. Now, that may be okay for normal day-to-day operation, but at times of major incident, it is evident that cellular networks can become overloaded. And where terrorist activity is involved, they can be switched off altogether. The London bombings was a prime example of this. At times of major incident, surely, this is when the mission-critical user will need that service most of all. The logical solution, you might suggest, is to negotiate priority access to the network. But actually, that's not so easy. It is my understanding that few operators are prepared to throw their paying customers off the network in order to satisfy the needs of the emergency services. Indeed, they and you could argue that this is a time when the public needs to be able to communicate the most, and so it's not a viable proposal anyway. I've also heard it said that such spikes in traffic will be less of an issue for data than it is for voice. Well, I think differently. Look around you. Many youngsters don't make voice calls like they used to, but you can see them texting or accessing the internet just about anywhere. Remember too that before long, GSM networks are going to be switched off. And it seems likely to me that in time, voice over IP will be used to deliver telephony over LTE networks. By that stage, the problem will be just as bad. By the way, it's not just the youngsters that you see texting messages. Cellular networks are commercial businesses, and they do not invest in the resilience that mission-critical users have come to expect. For example, just a few weeks ago, the T-Mobile network in Holland had a major outage. The problem occurred at 11:30 at night, and it affected over 2 million subscribers. Apparently, the engineers worked through the night and managed to get the backup system operational at 9 a.m. the following day. Now, this may be embarrassing for a commercial operator, but it is totally unacceptable where people's lives are at stake. By the way, as Tom Quirk mentioned yesterday, O2 had a similar problem in the UK just last week. So do we simply build out dedicated networks for mission-critical users to avoid this problem? Well, spectrum is the biggest hurdle that we have in that case. We, in the TETRA Association, have been working hard with the user community to convince the regulators to allocate spectrum for future broadband services. I regret to say that we failed to obtain any spectrum from the first digital dividend in Europe. Unless we can secure that spectrum, building any form of dedicated network is going to be difficult. It has been suggested that it will become possible to put voice services over an LTE network, and that this could be done in the existing 400 MHz allocations. It's possible, but there are some difficulties with this. There are serious limitations to LTE in a mission-critical environment, especially for voice services. For example, there is no group call capability. There is no direct mode capability. And it will not be easy to add this functionality. The LTE Standards Committee are unlikely to support such major additions. So what about a hybrid approach? Build your own networks in areas of high traffic demand and roam onto public carriers elsewhere. Well, at first sight, there seem to be some advantages to this approach, but there is a problem. Commercial operators only build out coverage where there is sufficient demand to justify the investment. This usually means major towns and cities, plus the ports, airports, and other places where demand is going to be high. I'd like to show you a map of the southwest of England, which happens to be where I live. So where would we expect the commercial operators to build LTE networks in the southwest of England? Well, it would probably be something like this. So where would the emergency services feel that it's justified to build their broadband networks? Well, I'm guessing, but I would suggest that it would be something like that. Now, if I overlay these two maps, you can see that they will be mostly in the same places. So migrating from one system to another is not really going to be of much advantage. More importantly, there won't be any coverage at all in the rural areas, or on the motorways, or on the railways, and many other areas where major incidents can and do occur. Well, as I promised, I have started this session with some questions, and some of these are not easy to answer. But there is no doubt in my mind that mobile broadband will become a very important technology in the future. And the TETRA Association is determined to be involved in shaping that future. We need to find answers to these questions because our users need solutions. Spectrum is critical if the users are to have a choice of solutions. I believe that we need to work together with all of the users and industry members that are involved in mission-critical mobile communications. We need to work together to create a single solution for all users, regardless of their existing technology. Only by working together will we have a chance of putting sufficient pressure on the regulators, and only together can we create a market that is big enough for industry to want to invest in. In the TETRA Association, we are determined to facilitate that cooperative environment, and we will be making some announcements on that subject in the coming months.